October 1932. A single-engine de Havilland Puss Moth lifts off from a dirt airfield in Karachi. At the controls is a 28-year-old industrialist named Jehangir Ratanji Tata, the first Indian ever issued a commercial pilot's license. In the cargo hold, mail. The destination, Bombay. This is Tata Airlines. One plane, one pilot, one route, and a country that does not yet exist as an independent nation. 28 years later, in 1960, the airline this flight founded, now renamed Air India, takes delivery of a Boeing 707 named Gauri Shankar. It becomes the first Asian carrier to operate the Boeing 707, marking the beginning of the jet age for Air India. Not Singapore Airlines, not Cathay Pacific, not Japan Airlines, Air India. By 1971, the airline is flying 747s under the branding Palace in the Sky. Air India is widely regarded as one of Asia's benchmark premium airlines, admired for its service, global network, and onboard experience. For roughly 2 decades, it is one of the airlines setting the standard, not chasing it. Between 1985 and 2019, an airline based in a country of 10 million people carried 90 million passengers between Dubai and India. By the early 2010s, Emirates had become one of India's largest international airlines, rivaling, and on many routes surpassing, Air India's international presence. Then, in February 2023, something happened that put that entire hierarchy back on the table. Air India placed one of the largest aircraft orders in aviation history, and the largest ever by a full-service airline. 470 aircraft, $70 billion, signed by a carrier that was still deeply loss-making and in the middle of a massive turnaround. Either this is the greatest corporate resurrection aviation has ever seen, or it is the most expensive vanity project the industry has ever produced. The truth, as always, is stranger, and it is aimed directly at Dubai. The UAE has a population of roughly 10 million. That population does not generate the demand to justify a fleet of 260 wide-body aircraft. It does not justify Dubai International handling 92.3 million passengers a year, making it the world's busiest international airport for a decade straight. The Gulf carriers built their empires on carrying passengers between 2 foreign countries who connect through a Gulf hub. A traveler from Mumbai to London routes through Dubai on Emirates. A traveler from Delhi to New York routes through Doha on Qatar Airways. The airline collects a fare for the full journey. The passenger never sets foot in the UAE or Qatar as a destination. They are just passing through. The model works because geography cooperates. The Middle East sits roughly equidistant between Europe and South Asia, a natural waypoint, and it is enormously dependent on one market above all others. Foreign carriers collectively carry more than 57% of all international passengers flying to and from India, according to aviation analytics firm Cirium. Over 70% of passengers on Emirates, Etihad, and Qatar flights connected to India were using Dubai, Doha, and Abu Dhabi as transit points, not destinations. Emirates alone has carried more than 90 million passengers between Dubai and India since 1985. Today, there are 540 weekly flights just between Dubai and India. That is not a market share. That is a systemic dependency. Without Indian traffic feeding their hubs, the economics of dozens of long-haul routes to secondary European and North American cities collapse. For decades, this arrangement was mutually beneficial. Air India, under state ownership, was a decaying institution. It hemorrhaged money. It flew ancient aircraft with broken seats and dark entertainment screens. The average employee age was 54. Major fleet renewal had effectively stalled for well over 15 years, leaving Air India operating one of the oldest long-haul fleets among major Asian carriers. Indian travelers had no reason to fly their national carrier when Emirates offered a superior product at a competitive price, even with the inconvenience of a connection. January 27, 2022, the Indian government signs away Air India for approximately $2.5 billion in cash and debt absorption. Another $6.2 billion in liabilities stays on the taxpayers' books. The buyer is Tata Sons, the same industrial conglomerate JRD Tata built the airline from. 69 years after nationalization, it returns to the family that founded it. Tata brought in Campbell Wilson as CEO in May 2022, a New Zealander who had built Scoot, Singapore Airlines' low-cost subsidiary, from nothing. His first internal memo to staff described the airline as technically functional, financially insolvent, and and culturally fractured. His first 6 months, he said publicly, were, in his phrase, triage, not transformation. Then in September 2022, Tata launched Vihan.ai, a 5-year plan structured around 3 phases: taxi, takeoff, climb. The targets were aggressive to the point of implausibility: triple the fleet, restore domestic market share to 30%, build a world-class global airline capable of competing with the industry's best. For an airline that had not bought a new plane in 17 years, this was not a business plan. It was a declaration. 5 months later, on February 14, 2023, the declaration became an order: 470 aircraft, 220 from Boeing, 250 from Airbus. Total list price, $70 billion. The Boeing portion alone was $34 billion. It surpassed American Airlines' 2011 order of 460 aircraft. At the time, it became one of the largest aircraft purchases ever announced in commercial aviation. The order breakdown reveals the strategy: 210 Airbus A320 family aircraft for domestic and short international, the segment where Indigo currently dominates; 190 Boeing 737 MAX jets for Air India Express, the low-cost arm; 20 Boeing 787 Dreamliners as a bridge fleet, replacing aging 777-200s, and then the two numbers that matter most: 40 Airbus A350s and 10 Boeing 777X. Those are the planes built specifically for the routes that generate most of Emirates and Qatar Airways' long-haul profit: Mumbai to New York, Bengaluru to San Francisco, Delhi to Sydney. In December 2024, Tata added another 100 Airbus aircraft to the order, including 10 more A350s. In October 2024, Air India Express absorbed AIX Connect, the low-cost carrier formerly known as Air Asia India. 1 month later, on November 12, 2024, Vistara merged into Air India. In exchange, Singapore Airlines took a 25.1% stake in the combined entity, backed by a fresh capital injection of $498 million. That is not a passive investment. Singapore Airlines put $500 million into Air India as a calculated bet on where Indian aviation is heading. The Air India Group now operates roughly 300 aircraft, runs over 8,300 flights per week, and covers 103 domestic and 71 international routes. It has hired 9,000 new employees in 2 years. The airline has also significantly lowered the average age of its workforce through an aggressive hiring campaign. 2 years earlier, none of this existed in this form. The strategic weapon at the heart of all this is not the 470 aircraft themselves, it is what 40 of them specifically can do. The Airbus A350-900 has a range of over 8,000 nautical miles. It burns roughly 25% less fuel per seat than the Boeing 777-200s it replaces. Its business class cabin, private suites, full flat beds, Panasonic X3 entertainment with over 3,000 hours of content, is not competing with what Emirates was flying 10 years ago. It is competing with what Emirates is flying now. 6 of those A350-900s have already entered service. They were originally built for Aeroflot before Russian sanctions redirected them to Toulouse's parked aircraft yard, where Air India acquired them. Since late 2023, they have been flying live routes: Delhi to London Heathrow twice daily from September 2024, Delhi to New York, JFK from November 2024, Delhi to Newark from January 2025. These are not future plans. These are live routes carrying real passengers who chose to skip the Dubai stopover entirely. Now hold those routes against Emirates' current network. Delhi to London non-stop on the A350, roughly 8 hours 45 minutes. Delhi to London via Dubai on Emirates 10 to 12 hours depending on the connection window. Delhi to New York non-stop, 15 hours. Delhi to New York via any Gulf hub, 18 hours or more. For a premium passenger, a senior executive, a business class fare, the kind of traveler that generates most of a long-haul route's actual profit, those hours are not abstract. They are the entire product. Geography also creates a natural advantage. For passengers whose journey begins in India, a non-stop flight is inherently more efficient whenever demand is strong enough to support one. For decades, that advantage remained largely untapped because India's flag carrier lacked the fleet, product, and financial strength to exploit it. Now, Air India is beginning to do exactly that. The data already reflects the shift. Cirium data shows Air India provides 75% of all non-stop seats between India and North America. Add Star Alliance partners Air Canada and United Airlines to the codeshare network, and that figure rises to 94% of direct India to North America capacity, 94% without a single Dubai connection required. But the second half of the strategic decode is what makes the Gulf carriers genuinely nervous, and it has nothing to do with airplanes. The bilateral air services agreement between India and the UAE allows for approximately 66,000 weekly seats in each direction. That cap has not been revised since 2014. Emirates utilizes nearly 100% of its entitlement. The UAE has repeatedly requested an increase of an additional 50,000 weekly seats. India has repeatedly said no. This is not administrative inertia. It is policy. The Indian government is deliberately restricting foreign carrier access to shield Air India's expansion window. For Air India to justify $70 billion on new planes, it needs a market environment where those planes have room to fly without being immediately undercut by Gulf carriers with 2 decades of head start on operational efficiency. The Star Alliance membership adds a third layer. Air India frequent flyers now earn and redeem miles across 25 partner airlines. Elite status holders access over 1,100 airport lounges in 192 countries. Emirates has no equivalent distribution network. It has never been in an alliance. It has always relied on its own metal. For 20 years, that was a strength. In the specific case of the Indian market, it is now a structural weakness. The Gulf carriers are not facing one challenge, they are facing 2. Just months after Air India signed the 470 aircraft deal, Indigo, India's dominant low-cost carrier, with more than 60% of the domestic market, walked into the 2023 Paris Air Show and placed an order for 500 A320 Neo family aircraft. 12 months later, Indigo ordered 30 Airbus A350-900 widebodies with options for another 70. In parallel, it dry-leased Boeing 787-9s from Norse Atlantic to begin long-haul flying immediately without waiting for its own widebody deliveries. Add the 2 orders together. India's combined airline order book now stands at approximately 1,000 aircraft for delivery over the next decade. That is not a market share war. That is a redrawing of the map of Asian aviation. Behind the fleet numbers sits a demographic pressure the Gulf carriers cannot influence. India is on track to become the world's 3rd largest economy. Its aviation market is already the 3rd largest in the world, growing at 8 to 10% annually, roughly twice the pace of the global average. The number of Indians who will fly internationally over the next decade is almost incomprehensibly large, and right now, the majority of those passengers are still connecting through someone else's hub, generating revenue for someone else's airline, and building someone else's dominance. Then layer the airport infrastructure onto the fleet. Delhi's Indira Gandhi International is undergoing a phased expansion targeting capacity of over 100 million passengers per year. Navi Mumbai International Airport, a purpose-built hub south of the existing Mumbai field, opened its first phase in 2025. Noida International, north of Delhi, is being developed as a second Delhi area hub. Bengaluru's Kempegowda International has completed Terminal 2. This is not an accidental build-out. It is the physical infrastructure required to make India's hubs functional origin points for long-haul aviation, rather than what they have been for 2 decades, overflowing domestic terminals with a few international gates bolted on. Emirates operates around 260 aircraft. Qatar Airways operates roughly 270. Etihad, around 100. Combined ME-3 fleet, approximately 630 aircraft. Combined Indian wide-body trajectory by the mid-2030s, more than double that. The rule that said Indian long-haul traffic had to route through a foreign hub was not a law of physics. It was a consequence of one specific structural reality. India had no premium long-haul carrier. That reality is ending. None of this is inevitable. Air India's execution has been, by its own CEO's admission, far from clean. In the financial year ending March 2025, Air India posted a consolidated net loss of approximately $1.3 billion. a 48% increase year-over-year. Its low-cost subsidiary, Air India Express, added another 5,832 crore rupees in losses. Combined, the group bled close to $1.2 billion in a single year. 3 years into Tata ownership, the airline still cannot make a rupee on its own operations. In the same year, Indigo posted a profit of 7,253 crore rupees, approximately $870 million. The product is inconsistent. Passengers boarding a newly delivered A350 on the New York route report cabins that compete with the world's best. Passengers boarding an unretrofitted 787-8 or a legacy 777-200 report an experience closer to the Air India of 2018. Broken entertainment systems, worn seats, dysfunctional power outlets. The full wide-body retrofit program, valued at around $400 million, runs into 2027. The pilot supply is thin. A severe shortage of experienced captains has triggered a bidding war between Air India and Indigo, with airlines reportedly offering joining bonuses of roughly $60,000 to poach experienced crew. New flight duty time limitation rules, intended to reduce fatigue, have paradoxically increased the number of pilots needed to sustain the existing schedule. And then there is the event that no fleet order can absorb. On June 12, 2025, Air India Flight 171, a Boeing 787-8 bound for London Gatwick, lifted off from Ahmedabad. 32 seconds after rotation, both engines lost thrust. The aircraft crashed into a medical college hostel less than 2 kilometers from the runway. 241 of the 242 people on board died. 19 more died on the ground. It was the first fatal crash of a Boeing 787 in history. It was the first fatal crash for Air India under Tata ownership, and it was the deadliest single aviation accident anywhere in the world in over a decade. Until that investigation is complete, the precise cause of the accident remains undetermined. Bookings recovered. The order kept moving. But the question the crash raised is one no balance sheet can resolve: whether Tata can rebuild not just the fleet and the network, but the safety culture that a premium long-haul brand ultimately depends on. Emirates isn't going anywhere, neither is Qatar Airways. Dubai International will still handle more than 90 million passengers this year. Emirates' product remains among the finest in commercial aviation. Its pricing flexibility, sustained by 2 decades of operational surplus, is something Air India cannot match while posting billion-dollar annual losses. But the settled hierarchy, the idea that Indian long-haul traffic would permanently route through a Gulf hub because no Indian carrier could offer a compelling alternative, is now facing its most credible challenge in decades. That is what Tata bought for $2.5 billion. That is what 470 aircraft, $70 billion, a Singapore Airlines partnership, a Star Alliance membership, and a frozen bilateral seat cap are collectively aimed at, not the destruction of Emirates. Something both smaller and more consequential: the removal of the assumption on which Emirates built its Indian market share. The demonstration effect is the part the rest of the industry should be watching. If Air India succeeds in repatriating a meaningful share of Indian long-haul traffic, even a third, even a quarter, the template gets copied. Turkish Airlines is already positioning around Istanbul as a Eurasian hub. Ethiopian Airlines is building the same play from Addis Ababa for Africa. Any country with enough diaspora, enough capital, and enough regulatory will to protect a flag carrier now has a working blueprint for reclaiming traffic that a Gulf carrier has been quietly monetizing for decades. Whether Tata actually pulls this off, whether the losses narrow before the delivery delays compound, whether the retrofits finish before the brand permanently splits into 2 experiences, whether the safety culture holds after Ahmedabad, remains genuinely uncertain. What is not uncertain is that Emirates, Qatar Airways, and Etihad already know what the 470 aircraft were aimed at.